about it for the first time. The other thing I'd like to tell you is we have one more guest lecture. It will not be on next Monday, it will be next Wednesday. Chris Sharples from Shop in New York City will be here to lecture, and that will be Wednesday at 4. I know this time of year is a conflict with other things, and many of us have had multiple appointments to go to, but that's what it will be. It won't be on Monday next week, it will be on Wednesday. Also, following the lecture, there will be a reception for students and give you a chance to meet with Christy outside. Also, we'll take Q&A afterwards. And now I'd like to have Malcolm introduce our speaker and say a few words about Landscape Architecture Month.
April is National Landscape Architecture Month, and this is our kickoff event. Hari's laughing here. It is. I don't know if there's a National Architecture Month or not. Is there? Not sure, but there is a National Landscape Architecture Month and a whole series of state, national, and regional events to celebrate our profession. So we're glad Christina's here today as our kickoff event. We'll actually be taking students down to Indianapolis next week for the annual Indianapolis Office Hop, which is a series of office open houses for students from both Purdue and Ball State Landscape Architecture program. That's next week, and then you should all make sure that you keep your eyes open for our 174th birthday party for Frederick Law Homestead. Yeah, he is. He's getting there at any rate. And I haven't seen him in a while, but I've heard he's doing well. So please look out for a special event for Fred coming up. His actual birthday is April 26th. So we'll probably see some special events on or around that momentous occasion of the founding patron saint of landscape architecture. So we are glad to have Christy Ten Eyck with us today from Phoenix. Christy describes herself as a Texan. She's a graduate of Texas Tech University in landscape architecture and has practiced in the Phoenix area for over 20 years, including a short period of time working for Steve Martino, who is a noted Phoenix landscape architect. She's had her own firm for 9 years, I believe she told me. She is a member of the advisory board for the Arizona State College of Architecture and Landscape Architecture in Tempe. And she's also a fellow of the American Society of Landscape Architects. She's going to be talking to us today about a material that's very special to those who live in the desert, but very rare and very precious, and the sort of role water plays in the world of landscape architecture in the desert Southwest. So I'm really looking forward to her talk. Please welcome Christy Ten Eyck.
Thank you so much. Well, I'm going to show you a whole bunch of slides, and I thought I'd start out. The whole reason I moved to Arizona was I went on a raft trip down the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon and went with 3 friends from school, and we just had an absolute blast. That's me riding the horn with a beer in one hand. And I just fell in love with the whole Arizona landscape, these deep canyons where little seeps of water would flow, and the desert bajadas where super drought-tolerant plants that have adapted for centuries to living in such a place without water. But I have to admit it, Rewalt, the river guide, was one of the main reasons I moved to Phoenix. Boy, this thing's sensitive. I moved to Phoenix. Anyway, that's supposed to be a joke. But again, the places where the water is in the desert are just, we consider it, the prehistoric peoples have always considered it sacred places. You can see even from this shot the desert that is just beyond on the slope, and then where the water grows is a totally different habitat. One of the early ruins in the Salt River Valley, which Phoenix is in, is called Pueblo Grande. And at this site, and you can go, there's a museum there, and the old platform mound is still there. This is what they imagined it looked like, but they estimate that at this particular settlement that they irrigated at least 10,000 acres of farmland. But the Salt River flows, or used to flow, right through the Salt River Valley, and they had miles and miles of these canals that they dug by hand with stones, and I'm not sure exactly what implements, but these are all the prehistoric canal alignments through the Salt River Valley. This is Tempe, where ASU is. This is where Phoenix, downtown Phoenix is, just to kind of give you bearings here. So this place has always been about people's ability to move water and you know, getting the water in so that they can survive. Then this is a map of Phoenix in the late 1800s, and the city fathers were touting Phoenix as, you know, by the first few decades of this century, many valley waterways and irrigated fields were so lush that visitors and civic boosters alike were calling Phoenix a city of gardens and trees. Everywhere there is shade, and plenty of it, observed a visitor in 1905. The entire valley, from Mesa into Phoenix, is one solid mass of green, and every road is a perfect avenue. Chinaberry trees, palm, and cottonwoods line the driveway, or lanes as they call them, and the entire distance from Mesa to Phoenix can be driven under an almost unbroken arch of shade. These are some of the old images of the canals that are still in Phoenix. You see, when the settlers in the late 1800s came, they found the old canals that the Hohokam had dug, and they redug them for their own use, and it just became this linear system of really verdant green areas that just became these recreational places that really added to the quality of life. Then after World War II, Phoenix really went through this boom, and this is a shot of, they cut down all the cottonwoods that used to line all the canals, so that, because a lot of these canals interfered with roadways, and they also felt that the cottonwoods took up too much of the water. So they put a lot of the smaller canals underground, and then pretty much eliminated most of the trees that used to line the canals and put them in these concrete ditches. I'm just trying to give you a little background of Phoenix so you can understand the place that me and my firm and others are working in. So downtown Phoenix, this is an aerial view of a portion of downtown Phoenix, but it has more vacant land than any major city in the US. It's now the 5th largest city, and you know, it's kind of like a donut. There's lots and lots of vacant land all throughout downtown. This is just right in downtown. But yet there are good things about Phoenix too. They at least had the foresight to create these and protect mountain preserves. There are mountains all throughout the metropolitan area that are preserved, that have hiking trails, and where the desert still remains. And this is a shot looking down to downtown Phoenix. I'll show you. This is downtown. This is what they call Midtown. That's where my office is. But anyway, it's, I think, at 3.5 million people now, and it's expected to grow to like 8.5 million within the next 25 years or something. And it's just, you know, our firm is really trying to figure out ways to connect the urban dweller with nature, because when you're in the city, you really lose the sense that you're in the desert. There are so many just overly paved areas, places where nature isn't really even allowed in. And if it is allowed in, a lot of times it's you know, a plant that might grow back east or in California. So we're kind of into really connecting people with the place of Arizona in the city. And so I've tried to kind of divide these projects up into some different types, but reconnection of the city to natural systems. And I've always loved that quote, remember it is forbidden to live in a city or town which has no garden or greenery. But this first project, this is standing up on South Mountain, excuse me. And I wanted to show you this, even though it's not a very good slide, but the Salt River actually flows right where this pointer is going. And the Salt River used to have a floodplain miles wide, but now with the city encroaching, it's become this constricted riverway. It's also, you know, industry is formed right on the edges. For about 100 years, people have thrown their trash all along the banks of the river. There are landfills, gravel mining pits. I mean, just been like abused. And then, of course, further upstream, the Roosevelt Dam was built, so there's no water in the river unless there's like a big rainy season or something and they let some of that water out. So it's really been this scar that has divided, you know, what you saw of downtown Phoenix with South Phoenix. And so I'm telling you about this project with the Corps of Engineers in the city of Phoenix to try to restore the native habitat that used to grow along the river. And this was a sketch we did to help with conveying how we could connect different open space systems and linear streetscapes with the river. You know, it was kind of like figuring out a puzzle, finding where existing parks are, old canal alignments, and figuring out how can we draw people to the river. But our first project that we did was on Central Avenue, and the city wanted to somehow mark going over the river, because really you hardly noticed it much because the land just sort of barely fell away from the road, and you know, it was always kind of bare, and you just didn't pay much attention to it. So we worked on this with a team of people, an architect and engineer, but we were really inspired by the Hohokam mounds, platform mounds, like that first one that I showed you, and how they built these places to view the river. We knew this was going to be essentially a trailhead for the future trails that the Corps of Engineers was going to do on the river. So we proposed these sort of plaza-like nodes on either side of the river with a shade structure and planted with a bosque of trees that kind of celebrate that passage over the water and create a meeting place before you go down to the trails below into the Salt River bed. And this is like a perspective sketch. This is very typical of what our concept sketches look like in the beginning when we're trying to express an idea. So this is the first phase, and City of Phoenix has actually built this with their own forces. They've been very short of money and just haven't had a whole bunch of money to it, but you can see as it's growing, the trees are becoming more prominent. We wanted to convey the whole idea of irrigation and canals, and you know, on a civic project like this, I mean, typically there's no money for like fountains or anything like that, and so this was probably one of the first projects where we tried to use irrigation as a fountain, and we created these irrigation canal runnels from tree to tree that if you just happen to be there when the water is flowing, and you guys may be saying, geez, I mean, that's no fountain. But for us in Phoenix, it's like a cool thing to even at some odd moment actually see water running through something. So anyway, the other thing that we felt that we had to do was to reuse the trash that people had thrown on the river. And these are these huge monoliths of concrete footings that we found that had tumbled down the river and been worn like that. And so we got to go pick all these found objects and put them in the plaza as little sculptural seating areas or places to pause that kind of show the power of water and, hopefully teach kids that you don't throw away trash, you reuse it. This is the other side of the river, the other quadrant, the northeast quadrant. The whole theory of this habitat restoration is that, first of all, we're using a combination of wastewater from this big stormwater drain. There's several of them that feed out into the river, and then that's one source. The other source is groundwater, the first layer of polluted groundwater. And like I said, there's all these landfills all around, and that first layer of groundwater isn't so good. So this is that reservoir that we created. The water gets pumped into here, and then we run it into smaller canals all through the site. This is a canal coming from where one of the big stormwater drains. And this is a slope, and so we let this water sort of seep down to our created wetland down here. And this is a shot from this winter, looking back at the first Gateway project. It hasn't been built on the other side of the road yet. We're still waiting to get the other side of the road done. They're in process. So just a seating area. And this is that constructed wetland. Here you can see that gateway was just being built. This is the old one. And then this is it like the next year after it's grown a little bit. And again, these are factories and industry all along the edge of the river. And then this was this last November after it's had another year or so to grow. Then we have trails all down on these banks. This is one of the little canals that feeds the habitat. Looking back up at the gateway. Here you can see an old curb that we used as seating elements all throughout. And this isn't the greatest shot, but I just love this shot of this little family that, lots of people have started to use it now, and it's just fun to see people using a place. But we've still got a long way to go. This is the first 5 miles that were done, and now they're about to start on the next few miles of it, and connect it eventually to a project called Tres Rios, which is where our wastewater treatment plant is, and they've created these constructed wetlands out of the sewer water, basically. So it'll all be connected. This is the Desert Botanical Garden, where I've done quite a bit of work over the years, and this was a project. This parking lot was already there, and our scope was really kind of this front little part here. And you used to enter the garden through asphalt and parked buses that had their engines running. So you used to be overcome with exhaust fumes, and it just wasn't the best way to enter the garden. Then you went through another parking lot to get in. There used to be another parking lot right here. And then there was a little admissions shack. And so we were charged with somehow getting those buses out of the way of the main path of the pedestrian and really creating a great series of thresholds for people when they park in this lot to enter the garden and to start to decompress. John Douglas was the architect, and let's see, these were this set of buildings and this set of buildings were built in this phase, and we were responsible for all the hardscape and exterior spaces. And this is the entry monument. There had been no monumentation at all when you came to the garden. There was just one of those standard little city-issued signs, Desert Botanical Garden. We built this out of gabions and filled it with native stone and simple entry monument marker. That big parking lot I was telling you about is up here, and so we intercepted the lane in the parking lot and put an entry pavilion here that just helped to slow the traffic down so that people couldn't whiz back and forth, and created a marker in the parking lot to draw people in. The symbol of the garden is the agave, which is, or you may have heard of it, called the century plant. And we wanted to showcase the ethnobotanical studies and research that the garden had done on the agave at the entry, and so to kind of lead people in and create a focal and also a baffle for the gift shop, we wanted to get people right in here. This is the new admissions area. We created a landform here that's sort of in celebration of the agave. And then we needed outdoor space at the new gift shop. This is the exit. And so carved a space where this old parking lot used to be all through here, and made this rainwater harvesting garden and plaza area. So this is a shot looking down at the entry arbor. Again, this road used to go all the way through, so we broke out a little island there and did this entry arbor and bridge. There was a wash here, and you never used to even know it. And do y'all know what a wash is? Or an arroyo? It's where water runs sometimes, very rarely, but it's a dip in the grade where lusher trees and things grow. And those are the most precious, some of the most precious parts of the desert is where the water flows. And so we created a bridge there. Before, they just had a little walkway and a little pipe about that big. You'd hardly even know that you were going over an arroyo. So we wanted to celebrate that crossing. Entry sketches of the entry arbor, went through some budget cuts and everything, but these helped to raise money for they used our sketches to raise the $15 million they needed for the entire project. And this is how it got, we lost our stone for budget reasons, and we're always in Phoenix trying to come up with ways to use just regular materials and in interesting ways. This is made out of basically just weathered steel pipe and rebar. And we wove the rebar in and out of the joists. And eventually, the plan is for the desert vine, Mascagnia macroptera, to grow up that. Also used a tractor disc for this little fountain. So we don't have the big budgets in, I know 15 million sounds like a lot, but a lot of that went to the architecture, and we had about 6 million, 6.5 million for all the things like the entry arbor, the walkways, changing the parking lots, the bridge, etc. So that's just looking back. Just some detail shots of the rebar climbing up and the vine climbing up the entry arbor. And our bridges, we used a sea channel for the top of the bridges and inlaid it with stones. You know, in every project, we're always looking for ways to appeal to all the senses, including touch. And so it's become kind of a trademark detail of the Desert Botanical Garden. And this is the entry plaza with that agave spiral I was telling you about. We did try to also minimize the use of concrete here. This space had to be able to take, you know, hundreds and hundreds of people or just a few people. And this material you see here is stabilized granite, so it's a permeable paving. And then we brought in the Palo Verdes that'll eventually touch and shade the whole entry court. Just looking back out, and you can see this is where our water harvesting runnel starts. And we worked with John Douglas to get the water from the roof of the gift shop. And, you know, it's not that big of a roof, so it's not like we're going to get tons of water, but it was really about expressing, you know, how sacred water is to us and making the path of water a special place in the garden. This is looking back where it goes deeper and deeper into the existing grade. The parking lot was basically up at that higher grade, and we just cut and carved in, sculpted this little plaza in. And again, you know, there's lots of kids in urban Phoenix that never get out hiking in the arroyos or the washes. And this is just one near Paestawa Peak, but they're just special places where you're sheltered and cooler. And that was really the sense. This was the parking lot that was there before, and this is after, in about the same spot. That hopefully people, even though they may not get to the desert, they would get the feeling of what it feels like to be next to an arroyo. And this is a sketch that we did in the beginning to show the concept. And then this is it from last year after it's grown. And the final place where the water goes is right back in here. It's kind of hard to see in this. This is a wildflower pavilion that we designed to just with very natural materials that's just nestled in to the desert where they hold weddings and special dinners and things. And then we've done all kinds of little seating areas throughout the garden. This particular place had this great tree, and we have just a small little cistern of water that makes it a real special little microclimate. You know, I learned a lot from traveling to Spain and seeing how they use water in very judicious ways for maximum effect. And there's just something about a vessel of water that's brimming over. It sort of fakes you into thinking you've got enough, you know, and it's just this feeling of plenitude or something. And anyway, so this is like a little patio area off the auditorium at the Desert Botanical Garden. And this is another outdoor space where they hold weddings at the garden. And this was this is an orientation amphitheater that they used to have a bunch of greenhouses back in here, and we said, geez, you guys, this is a gorgeous spot. Seems like it would be a cool place we could fit in a little amphitheater, and they went for it, and it's a key area with all the school groups, and again, they have weddings and things there too. We've done a lot of renovation projects, and I love working on renovation projects. This is my building, my office building, that I convinced a bank to let us, to lend us the money to buy, and so that's a before picture. It looked like a little dentist's office kind of thing, and that's it now. We sandblasted it all and changed that front soffit and totally redid the landscape and hardscape. We used the gabions for retaining wall out front. And I love the thought of using these because the block and the concrete that the building itself is made of is what this rock is that came down the Salt River. They grind it up and make the concrete. So it was just kind of like the rock in all its forms. This is our parking lot. We used a permeable paver and then stabilized granite entryway. And I planted this used to be asphalt all the way to the west side of the building, and then there was that little piece of turf out front. But I wanted to, this is right in central Phoenix where it happens to be very lush and green. So I used all desert riparian grasses and the native mesquite. And it blends in, but it also stands out. That's the entry up to the front. And then what's really funny about this building, you'd never know it from the front, that it's 2-story, and it drops down to a subterranean courtyard on the east. We cut all these windows in. None of those 4 windows were there. Anyway, and this is a project I'm going to tell you about, the Phoenix Indian School site, Steele Indian School Park. It had one of those histories that is not the greatest. People thought they were helping things. And some kids, they really did help. But I don't know if y'all know the history of the Indian schools, but there were schools all over the country where they took the Native American children to try to assimilate them into sort of the white way of life. And anyway, probably wasn't the best way to approach it, but it was something that was done. And they really, in a lot of ways, tried to let the kid, teach the kids not to use their native culture, their native language. They made them cut their hair. I mean, there was quite the history to this place. But regardless of these students' experiences there, and again, we had lots of workshops with the tribes. Some of them loved it and were grateful for it, and others hated every minute of it. So it was very varied, but no matter what their experience was, they feel this site is sacred place because of the generations of their families that went there. It's 78 acres in kind of that midtown Phoenix area. And the city of Phoenix already knew what they wanted. They wanted this to be a big park where they could hold their big 4th of July celebration. They have like 250,000 people here on 4th of July back in this, what's called the Phoenix Green. They bring water from the canal. There's a canal up here. The water comes in through a smaller canal and into a lake, and this water irrigates the whole site. This is the core area around the 3 existing buildings that remain. There used to be buildings all over the site, but they were long ago torn down. And then this is what we call kind of the entry garden here. But it's just different working with this was one of my first public projects I ever worked on. And, there's lots of different people with lots of views. So that's one of the biggest challenges I think you'll find in practice is working with these diverse groups and coming up with schemes that work for everybody. Around the main part of the 3 existing buildings, we kept some of the existing landscape character that was always there. It was always sort of formally planted and very green. It's always been an oasis for the city of Phoenix. This is a historic photograph looking at the cafeteria building. And this is it today. And that's actually a blue heron fishing in the lake there. Again, in our workshops with the Native Americans, they said they wanted water to be expressed in the site, to be a central kind of theme, because they owed their existence to the presence of water. So this is in the central part of that historic core. And then we also spoke to them about, or asked them what they would want to see for this. This is about 10 acres, this particular garden, and it's to the south of that historic core. How would you like us to approach this? And they basically told us they wanted to go into the ground and be surrounded by their native plants. And so this is that historic core. We designed a bridge that went across this water that's sort of like an archetypal passing into another place. And then what we call the kiva space here. This is the kiva with a fire source in the center. And then we have a half-a-mile trail if you go the whole way, and it goes 15 feet below ground. This is in the kiva. We had some of the greatest quotes from the people that were in these workshops, and one of the people there pretended that they were this Native American spirit, and he wrote some of the most beautiful words, and so we really wanted to use it in the park, and especially in this garden. And this is a shot at the kiva where the fire pit is. We craned these 4 big old desert ironwoods in. But our people are one, even though we come from many tribes. We are all brothers and sisters, and the earth is our mother. It is in this meeting place that we all gather to remember our mother. It is in this meeting place that we all gather to remember our past and to plan our futures. Here, all things are good and point to a bright tomorrow. I have visited this place often in my dreams. It is a place filled with magic and power. It is here that the past and the future can be bridged. It is here we can find ourselves. So this was that garden under construction in 2001. See, the other motivating force also to let this garden go in the ground was that the city of Phoenix said, we don't want anything blocking those 3 historic buildings. And so this was part of our ammunition to let us dig this major excavation. And this was on opening day in November 2001, and I'm surprised we weren't run out of town on a rail. I mean, this is, you guys, this is what public landscape with the budgets we have looks like on day 1. So you've just kind of got to have faith that it's going to grow. And anyway, this is it last April. So you can see it's really starting to grow and be strong. It's so, I'm sure you're all just sitting there going, oh my God, it's with y'all's trees. I always marvel at how huge your trees are. It's just, hopefully it does show you though how harsh of an environment this city is, especially when there isn't much green around, and the struggle just to get gardens like this built within the city is amazing. But anyway, the planting in that garden, I'm very inspired by this shot. It's up at Spur Cross, which is just north of Phoenix, about 45 minutes. But again, trying to get across the different sort of biomes of the desert, the arid desert slopes, and then as you get to the center of the garden, the more riparian species. So this is the trail coming down into the garden. And then this was on day 1, down in the very center. One of the things that we did convince them to do, there were all these sidewalks all over the place, and paths and a few old roads. We convinced them to let us salvage all of the concrete from the site and use it to build this garden. So these walls are all built out of that broken concrete where the kids walked, and it actually adds this amazing layer of meaning to the garden, especially for the people whose family went to school here, and for the people that went to school here. So this is last April So you can see it's really growing. And then we have this sacred little piece. I know I'm using that word too much, sacred, but water is just so precious in Phoenix, and that's sort of like the treat at the center of the garden. It's really a labyrinth-like garden. But this is another poem that we found that we loved, that we etched into the rim of this, and unless you're really looking, you don't even see it. But this is the water, my water. This is the river, my river. We love its water. We love its driftwood, its foam wood. It shall flow forever. When the weather grows hot, it will overflow its banks. It shall flow forever. But anyway, and microclimates, and just trying to make the urban areas more porous is part of what we do on a daily basis. And I always liked this quote too: "The desert is beautiful," the Little Prince added, and that was true. I've always loved the desert. One sits down on a desert sand dune, sees nothing, hears nothing, yet through the silence something throbs and gleams. What makes the desert beautiful, said the Little Prince, is that somewhere it hides a well. I always feel like in a lot of our projects, you know, we're trying to create that little mysterious place where that water might be or might fall if it ever rains. This is a pretty recent project that we've just finished, the Biodesign Institute at Arizona State University at the Tempe campus. These first two buildings are built now. This is a third phase. This is a conference center and a phase 3. But this is an existing parking garage. The architects we worked with are Gould Evans, and they set these big old buildings up on a 5-foot plinth. And plinths are big with architects these days. They're as if their buildings aren't high enough. Not trying to offend any of the architects in the room, but anyway, I love architects. You know, we have lots of fun and games working together. But anyway, so I felt that was kind of interesting. And then the other thing was that next to this parking garage, the city or the campus had to maintain this huge retention basin. You see, the desert, we don't get the soft little gentle rains that you guys probably get sometimes. If and when we get rain, we get it, and it's a deluge. You know, they don't know what to do with it. In fact, there are parts of Phoenix where we have canals that are bringing this water in from the Colorado River, from the Colorado Rockies. And then right next to it, we have a Corps of Engineers drainage ditch that takes out any rainwater just as quickly as possible. It's so ironic and bizarre, but that's where we live. And so many projects are required to have these retention basins, and we've always tried to do retention basins so that they become this like urban wildlife habitat kind of opportunity. So we got the idea, okay, what if we took the plinth around and showed the Bahada landscape in a stylized way, and then with this retention, we take it across the road and show what it is to be in a wash or an arroyo. And because we're real interested in, when this conference center gets built, they're going to have these researchers from all over the globe coming to visit. And so we wanted to give them the experience of what it feels like to be in the desert. And this is Scottsdale Road. As you go further north, it's in Scottsdale. When it crosses the Salt River, which is right up here, it's in Tempe. So it was a very urban area. This is it right after it was planted, so it looks very stark here. But again, we had to get people up 5 feet, and so we did these terraced beds of plants that have been used in various ways for healing and medicines. That's the very soon after it was planted. This is looking down at the retention basin. I was telling you, I'm in the parking garage taking this shot, looking back at the Biodesign Institute. Phase 2 is just being built, and this was it right after it was planted. Again, you got to have the faith. And this was a before picture of our site across the street from that parking garage. The institute is right about here now, and then that's afterward. But this our water harvesting, we decided to make this riparian biome that connects with the one across the street, and we also wanted to wrap in an outdoor gathering space that was sort of surrounded by what we call a biosponge. And a biosponge is nothing more than, you know, a garden, but we liked the name. But we got all the water from the roof, and it comes out into the garden in here. We take it around, and then if we ever have a humongous rain event, it eventually goes into this drain and across to the larger retention area. So this is where the water comes out. And this was really neat. I mean, this site is not that far from the Salt River, although it's far out of the floodplain now. It used to probably be in it, but you would dig down about 10 feet and river rock is down there, the old riverbed. Anyway, this was it last year. And this is a place in the amphitheater, again, where we used irrigation as an excuse to do this sort of sculptural little termination of the amphitheater. And if you just happen to be there when that valve goes on, it'll puddle up with water and spill into the garden. This is a project in Tucson that we're doing, a cancer center clinic. You will come to this phase 1 building to, you know, get diagnosed if you have cancer. You'll come here to get treated for cancer. They'll administer, you know, chemotherapy here. And I've just heard nightmare tales of people who've had cancer, and, you know, they're lined up in these wheelchairs in this gray room, just getting imbibed with chemo. And so our client here really wanted to do something different and make it more of a healing kind of place. It's a really neat piece of property in Tucson. You can really almost just feel the land drawing you down to the Rito River, and the Catalinas are in the distance. And so this was actually the old site of the Tucson General Hospital, and the architects, co-architects out of LA, they've totally gutted it and are totally redoing it. So that's that first phase building. But what we propose is that eventually the master plan of the site try to reinvent what the Arroyos might have done on that site and create these healing gardens outside of each different building that gets built. So this is that first phase. And this is a temporary parking lot until they start to build the parking structures. But you get out of your car and you come in these different places to the different clinics. They wanted separate entries for all the different clinics. So the way we have it, you actually go over bridges to get in to the clinic. And our hope is that, you know, as you start to come from the parking lot, you really start to decompress. You're surrounded by these desert trees and, you know, with the birds and butterflies and all those good things. And it sort of maybe helps settle your heart down as you're walking in. This is a section. The architects even cut out these open air atriums inside the building so that we could take the garden all the way in. This is the waiting room, that's the atrium. The treatment rooms are up here where you'd get chemo. And so we have the riparian Arizona sycamore growing in there. But then out here we have the Palo Verdes and mesquites and ironwood. These are little cantilevered patios that come out off each of the clinics for people to sit and have a cup of iced tea. This is the arroyo. And then we have a trail that goes around, also kind of a meditative trail that if you wanted to just take a break and take a walk or whatever, you could. And then we created these little niches built into the landform between the parking lot and the clinic for people if they really wanted to be totally alone and away from other people. This is a sketch looking down the arroyo. We're harvesting the roof water and the condensate from the air conditioning systems that will go and help feed the garden. And again, you know, a lot of these places where we create these depressions or even that runnel at the Desert Botanical Garden, it's not so much about the water as the memory of water. It's really more about just praying and hoping someday it'll come and be there. But a lot of people don't understand that. Even people in Phoenix don't understand it. But anyway, this is another project. This is U of A, their College of Architecture and Landscape Architecture. This is the existing building. Mainly architecture is in there right now. Landscape architecture is in another building. They're building another great big building right here to unite everybody in the program. And the college told us, Ron Stoltz, make the landscape a learning experience, make it interpretive, use a range of materials, make it an oasis, make it fun and attraction. And this is a very busy road, and it's got the right name. It's called Speedway. And anyway, but what we could see, there's a future library that's going to be built here. So this was just a quickie little sketch to show how this new project would fit in with the future library. But as you can see from these photos, it was practically all asphalt. And so this is what we've proposed. This is the new building, but we've proposed to make this garden and rip up this asphalt as much as they would let us and use all the sources of water that we can from the building. You know, just like a canyon has these secret little mysterious places where water seeps out, we felt like the building could act like the canyon walls. And so we're getting the gray water, which is the water from mainly the sinks and the drinking fountains. And then we're getting all the roof water. And then, you know, we were having a meeting one day with facilities, and a guy was saying, oh, hey, you can have some water we get off this, I forget what it is. Todd in my office knows, but it's some kind of water, wastewater that they use from another, that's created from another building. So everybody's sort of funneling all the water together to let us use for this garden, and it comes out in our upper level of the garden, and it goes down into these bioremediation ponds, and the students will be, this will be like a learning laboratory for them to plant different things and just see what works, what doesn't, that kind of thing, but also create this fantastic habitat for not only for students and professors, but also the birds of the area. And it's amazing in Phoenix and Tucson, when you plant the right plants, like the native plants, the birds that you get, it's almost immediate how quickly they find the place. I guess they're just searching so hard to find little bits of nature within the city that they're attracted to it. But then this is a lower space, a gathering space for students. And what is that, a fly? I'm surprised there are any flies that are alive right now. It's so cold out there. Maybe he wintered in here. Anyway, the other thing that we proposed was to use a raised deck so that all of the ground was permeable. There was no hardscape on the land, on the earth. And so this is like these metal perforated panels that'll be like a deck, and we'll have trees coming up through them. And this is basically the concept. We took the roof water, we're getting the, and this was early on, it may not be exactly like this right now, but we're getting the condensate and it goes into these different tanks. We're using, like the gray water goes into one area of the garden because the students want to specifically study what gray water, the effects of it on plants versus storm water. And into the biosponge. This is just a close-up drawing of it. I was proposing also to have a little fire pit down in that sunken garden area, but they X'd that out. Again, none of this was all just, this is this back area that was concrete and granite. It had concrete where stormwater from the parking lot went, and we're just proposing to make it green. This is the convention center in Phoenix, and the main thing I wanted to talk about was this plaza area where we're doing a water harvesting garden there. We've got a wall that's about 110 feet long, and it's going to be about 12 feet tall. And it'll be constructed out of wire mesh and soil and stone. But we're getting the condensate from the air conditioners from the convention center, actually just a portion of the condensate. God, we had to fight for every little condenser unit we could to get the water from, because it does cost extra to have a separate pipe for condensate. Usually they put it right in the sewer, and it goes into the sewer system. But condensate is totally sterile. It's like distilled water. It's great water. And so we're bringing it, and it'll drip into the top of our water wall and then into our desert riparian garden. This is a shot in downtown Phoenix, and we've been doing a lot of work down there. ASU is building a new campus in downtown Phoenix. This is where the Civic Center project is, and that plaza I was showing you is right here. This is the old Civic Center. It's right here. The old Civic Center is being torn down, and they're building new. This is the first phase that they've just built. But with ASU, we've been doing a lot of work with them on just trying to help them define what is their campus like in downtown. And the President Crow really wants this university that totally blends with the rest of the downtown. Although, there's not much to blend with down there right now. It's pretty blank. But so we're proposing new civic spaces in downtown, streetscapes where we narrow the roads and create more room for the pedestrian. Bringing some of our region into downtown. This is the Palo Verde tree, and we really feel like this tree is, what the cherry tree is to Japan and Washington, D.C. This is our cherry tree, the Palo Verde. It has these cadmium yellow blooms about this time of year, and to bring that feel of our region into downtown. And they do create some great shade also if they're properly maintained. So we're proposing these linear shade gardens along the streets. This is just a shot of trying to show really making the intersections and the plazas, the entry points to these buildings, major gathering spaces. We're also, intrigued with the history and the history that actually lays under the existing hardscape of the city that has been long forgotten. There was a canal that went right through downtown Phoenix. And we had this idea, how could we start to try to, you know, kind of hint at what used to be here, but in a new way. And so we've proposed first in a series of systems of small runnels that might go through downtown Phoenix that would harvest the condensate from all these big high-rises. And there are hundreds of thousands of gallons of condensate that go into the sewer. And it's an ephemeral source of water, but into these canals that would lead to the civic spaces and help water the parks and linear gardens. You know, harvesting gray water, condensate is nothing new. San Antonio, lots of places have ordinances in effect already where they're required to use this water. So this is a typical existing downtown street in Phoenix, and just some sketches on, this is one that happens to lead to through the new campus on widening the pedestrian ways and creating these little runnels of water. This is a shot I took at this place called Bilello Ranch in West Texas, but it could be nothing more than just some articulation in the hardscape that would thread water if and when it does come through downtown Phoenix. And it could be in various forms. Public artists and what these cisterns might look like. You know, they could be these very artistic vessels of water that are all through downtown that would be connected with this little trough. Again, just some more before and after sketches of different parts of Phoenix. But so this first little canal would come down Taylor and then come into our civic space where we'd have these bioremediation ponds, and then we'd use it to irrigate the park. Just some shots of that civic space. This was a doodle that we did one Friday afternoon over the aerial of downtown Phoenix. What would we do if we could redo the city? The orange are new buildings that we knew were going to be taking place, and the yellow indicates vacant land that could be used for tree nurseries all throughout the downtown area. And then just using streets to create these linear gardens, even alleys, and then these pockets, these entries and courts and places scattered through Phoenix that could draw people and combine history, region, and art. And then this is a project I've been working on with Foster and Partners out of London and Will Bruder out of Phoenix and Banish and Partner out of Stuttgart. But our firms came together. This is just showing Foster's work, Banish, Bruder, who did the Phoenix City Library, and then our work at the Botanical Garden. But this is a mixed-use property. It's about 10 acres on the ASU campus. Trying to find the site. I think it's right here. But this project is a key corner in Tempe and at the campus, and it's really a link to from the campus to the city, and an important place. It's to have academic housing or academic classrooms, student housing, market rate housing, retail. So it's a real mixed use project for the campus. And here we are all working in London at a design charrette. Oh, okay. Again, just a plan showing the sort of the circulation patterns, how it would connect to the campus. This is the Tempe campus. This is Gamage Auditorium that Frank Lloyd Wright did. This is downtown Tempe. and how it would connect in with these existing malls into campus. Our team was inspired, can you tell, by the canyons of Arizona. And so this is a shot of the model, this being Mill Avenue that goes into Tempe, and then all the new buildings, the business school, fine arts, a new hotel. We wanted it to be a place that people would be 24/7, an oasis for the campus. So here's kind of the layout of all of the buildings with this inner pedestrian space that weaves through and connects into campus and the rest of the city. We would use some sort of shading structure that would be reminiscent of a cloud that would filter the harsh rays of the sun. Each courtyard has its own thermal store underneath to provide cooling in the summer and heating in the winter. We'd be harvesting all of the water, the rainwater, the condensate to use as water features through the site. Again, the influence of the canyon. If you've never been to Arizona, you really should go and hike through the Grand Canyon. And it's an amazing place, and it's really hard for me to convey how special it is to you if you haven't been there. But each building would have roof gardens and lots of gathering space on the roofs as well as down below. These are some of the roof garden plans. Again, the roof gardens would have more of the Bahada landscape. For the clouds, it's some synthetic material. I don't know the exact material, and this was a competition which we won, but I know they're researching it right now, and it's gone through some amazing budget cuts. And we still have clouds, though, I'm happy to report. But I'm not sure what material the architects are looking into for those. I'll find out, though, and get back with you. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those materials that's going to last for or at least they say it'll last for 25 or 30 years. They're really intense, or almost like plastic kind of fabric. Yes, it blocks some of them, although it allows some stuff to still come through. So anyway, that's about it. So, anyway, that's some of our work in Phoenix. Anybody have any questions? Thanks.